Let me begin by introducing our first speaker, David Swanson, whose books include War No More, The Case for Abolition, The Military-Industrial Complex at 50, and When the World Outlawed War. He is the host of Talk Nation Radio and campaign coordinator for Roots Action, an online initiative dedicated to galvanizing Americans committed to economic fairness, equal rights, civil liberties, environmental protection, and defunding endless wars. He also works on the Communications Committee of Veterans for Peace, of which he is an associate non-veteran member, and is Secretary of Peace in the Green Shadow Cabinet, a civic project which provides an ongoing opposition and alternative voice to the dysfunctional government in Washington, D.C. David Swanson.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for setting this up. It's great to be here. I think maybe all of those endorsers should have waited to hear what we were going to say first before they endorsed us, but hopefully they won't be sorry. I wrote down some remarks. I'll try to fit them into 20 minutes. The primary problem, I think, with weaponized drones is that the weapons murder people. And they murder people in a way that looks more like murder to a lot of observers than other forms of military murder do, such as murder by indiscriminate bombing or artillery or infantry or dropping white phosphorus on people. When President Obama looks through a list of men, women, and children on a Tuesday terror meeting and picks which ones to murder and has them murdered, and you can call it war or not call it war, it begins to look to a lot of people like murder. Many of the victims are civilians. Many are men suspected of or just of the age for combat. And in fact, the policy has been to define military-aged males as combatants. And other victims are alleged to be serious criminals. Not indicted, not charged, not tried or convicted, just alleged. And they're blown up along with anybody too nearby. It begins to look like the killing spree of a disgruntled employee at a shopping mall. But there's a key difference. It's happening in a foreign place with people who don't look like us or talk like us. I've been asked more than once, aren't drones preferable to piloted planes or ground troops, since with drones nobody gets killed? This is what drones do to foreign policy. They create deceptively easy and deceptively cost-free solutions. The drone war on Yemen didn't replace some other kind of war that was worse. It added another war to the list. Here is the real danger. We're making murder in its most recognizable form acceptable, and we're defining it out of existence when the victims belong to that 96% of humanity that's never been considered quite all the way human in this country, which leaves only the slightest step to including certain traitorous Americans as well. President Obama jokes about sending drones after his daughter's boyfriends, and the press corps laughs. Former NSA and CIA Director Michael Hayden jokes about putting Edward Snowden on the kill list, and everybody laughs. If we can be at war with individual criminals, why not add whistleblowers to the list? They reveal the powerful secrets that give our high priests their prestige. They reveal crimes and abuses that outrage us, but outrage foreign nations too. They open a door through which we can begin to question what the distinction really is between joking about murder by million-dollar missile and joking about murder with an axe, such that we admire one and are horrified by the other. The fact is that the most realistic mass murder costumes you will see at the Halloween parade will be on men and women who've wandered up from Wall Street in their stylish suits. The drone industry seems quite pleased with our acceptance of their technology for murder, but frustrated that some of us are resistant in our own backward, superstitious way to favoring the use of killer drones that are fully automated. That is, we've accepted drones as good, moral killing devices when a human is at a desk to pull the trigger. But we find something vaguely disturbing about the drone pulling the trigger itself. Michael Toscano, president and CEO of the Association of Unmanned Vehicle Systems International, says, quote, "Right now in human nature, it's unacceptable for a machine to kill a human being. But he is confident that that will change as we begin to wise up and see the advantages." In fact, There are those who would like to ban automated drones and automated killing robots of all types, and I agree with them exactly as far as they go. Any weapon we can ban, let's ban it. But let's not in the process make non-automated drone murder acceptable. If you listen to the accounts of some former drone pilots, so-called pilots who dress up in pilot suits and sit at a desk to fly drones, and who drive past a sign on the way home every day that says, "Buckle up, this is the most dangerous part of your day." If you listen to these people, there is not significantly more moral consideration going into the human pulling of the trigger than there would be with the drone pulling the trigger. The majority of volunteers in experiments are willing to inflict extreme pain or death on other human beings when a scientist tells them to do so for the good of science. These are called Milgram experiments, and the pain or death is pretended by actors. Drone pilots do real Milgram experiments, where the deaths are real, the injuries are real, the suffering is real. Drones do not, of course, just kill. They traumatize children and adults. The buzzing overhead, threatening imminent death for weeks on end, is a severe form of cruelty and an extreme case of power over others at an extreme distance, and exactly as indiscriminate as poison gas. Mothers in Yemen teach neighbors' kids in their homes for fear of letting them go to school. In Gaza, people refer to Israel's drones with a word that means buzz, but can also mean a relentlessly nagging wife. In Living Under Drones, the report produced here at NYU and at Stanford, I think that report made a lot of people aware of what drones do to Pakistan, whose prime minister today told our president it had to stop. Whole societies are devastated by the ongoing threat and the sporadic murders. Israel has killed hundreds in Gaza with drones, but the drone pilot sits at his desk and follows the instructions of his authority figure. On June 6th, NBC News interviewed a former drone pilot named Brandon Bryant, who was deeply depressed over his role in killing over 1,600 people. He described watching his victims bleed to death and wondering what, if anything, they were guilty of. It became clear why drone pilots suffer PTSD at higher rates than real pilots. They see everything, including the children they kill. Quote, after participating in hundreds of missions over the years, Bryant said he lost respect for life and began to feel like a sociopath. When he told a woman he was seeing that he'd been a drone operator and contributed to the deaths of a large number of people, she cut him off. Quote, she looked at me like I was a monster, he said, and she never wanted to touch me again. Somehow members of the United States Congress, where drones have their own caucus to represent them, seem less turned off, if not in fact aroused. But what about the rest of us? Where do we come down? A majority in the US, a shrinking majority, but still, as far as I know, a majority, favors using drones to kill non-Americans outside of the United States. Pew surveyed 39 countries this past summer and found 3 that supported this policy. Any guesses? Israel.
United States.
The United States. Kenya. The United States, Kenya, and Israel. I don't know. And within the United States, there's not a big partisan divide. There is much more concern, however, about killing U.S. citizens or killing anyone within the United States, but less if they're immigrants on the border, less in hostage situations, etc. The first place the wars will come home is in our minds. The U.S. Congress recently gave the Capitol Police the longest standing ovation since Osama bin Laden's Muslim sea burial for what quickly turned out to be the shooting of an unarmed mother trying to get away.
Oh my God.
Congress members are in the habit of cheering for senseless murder abroad in the form of wars. Drone victims are labeled militants after the fact by virtue of being dead. Transfer those habits to the streets of Capitol Hill, and it's easy enough to imagine that a dead woman deserved to die. After all, she's dead. Our police are beginning to look like the military and the public like the enemy. Murderers are cheered if they wear uniforms. Bloomberg claims absurdly to have the 7th largest army in the world. And small-town police departments with nothing worse than drunk driving to confront them are stocking up on weaponry, including weaponized drones, weaponized with tear gas, rubber bullets, and other anti-personnel devices. In Montgomery County, Texas, the sheriff showed off a drone to the media, but crashed it into his armored vehicle, thereby proving that he needed the armored vehicle. Also in Texas, when the Department of Homeland Security challenged the University of Texas, Austin, to hack into a drone and take control of it, the response was no problem, and it was quickly done. Is this a part of U.S. wars people are really going to sit back and watch come home? Many of the drones going into the U.S. skies will be for surveillance. A drone can sit too high up in the sky to see it from the ground, but record everything on the ground for hours and hours on video. A drone as small as a bird or a bug can listen to you and your cell phone inside your home. Drones can threaten and intimidate potential protesters as well as racially and religiously profiled groups with surveillance and with weaponry. The NSA has been a big part of the kill list program, the same NSA that tracks all of us in the land of the free. A Congressional Research Service report arrived at the obvious conclusion that drones are incompatible with the Fourth Amendment. I would add the First Amendment, and I would add representative government. So the fact that the technology is exciting, or that drones can perform lots of useful and harmless functions is all well and good, but figure out how they're compatible with constitutional rights first, and then allow them in those ways if possible. And if it isn't, then instead of using drones to fight forest fires, let's focus on halting climate change. If we've survived this long without getting our coffee delivered by drone, I think we can make it a little farther. It's not the technology's fault, we're told, by those more offended at insults to technology than by assaults on humans. Drones carrying Hellfire missiles over houses on the other side of the world don't kill people, people kill people. But as it happens, drones don't hunt deer, drones don't protect grandma. The Second Amendment right to an 18th century musket when you're taking part in a state militia does not create a right to killer flying robots. This is a new technology that needs to be dealt with as such. It is a technology of legalized murder. It's always struck me as odd that in civilized, Geneva Conventionized, Samantha Powerized war, the only crime that gets legalized is murder. Not torture, not assault or rape or theft or marijuana or cheating on your taxes or parking in a handicap spot, just murder. But will somebody please explain to me why homicide bombing is not as bad as suicide bombing? It isn't strictly true, after all, that the damage is all on one side. As we learn the geography of the world by our wars, we learn the location of our drone bases by the blowback, as we just did in Yemen, as we did a couple years back in Afghanistan. Drones make us all less safe. As Malala just pointed out to the Obama family, the drone wars fuel terrorism. Drones also kill with friendly fire. Drones with or without weapons crash a lot. And drones make the initiation of violence easier, more secretive, and more concentrated. When sending missiles into Syria was made a big public question, we overwhelmed the Congress, which said no. But missiles are sent into other countries all the time from drones, and we're not asked. The UN, which has been looking at US, Israeli, and UK drone use, has just submitted a couple of reports on drones to the General Assembly ahead of a debate scheduled for Friday. The reports make some useful points. US drones have killed hundreds of civilians. Drones make war the norm rather than the exception. Signature strikes are illegal. Double tap strikes, where you shoot at the rescuers of the previous strike, are illegal. Killing rather than capturing is illegal. Imminence, as a term to define a supposed threat, cannot be redefined to mean eventual or just barely imaginable. Threatened by drones is the fundamental right to life. However, the UN reports are so subservient to Western lawyer groupthink as to allow that some drone kills are legal, and to make the determination of which ones are legal and which are not so complex that nobody can possibly say. The determination will be political rather than empirical. The UN wants transparency, and I do think that is a stronger demand than asking for the so-called legal memos that Obama has hidden in a drawer which supposedly make the drone kills legal. We do not need to see that lawyerly contortionism. Do you remember Obama's speech back in May at which he claimed that only 4 of his victims had been Americans, and for one of them, he had invented criteria for himself to follow, even though all available evidence suggested he did not, even in that case. And he promised to apply those same criteria to foreigners going forward, maybe in some countries, depending. And remember the liberal applause for that. Never, ever do I recall our demands of President Bush being that he give a speech. There was always something more demanded. And how happy people were this past week when instead of blowing somebody up with a drone, Obama kidnapped them and interrogated them in secret on a ship in the ocean. We don't need the memos. We need the videos. The times, places, names, justifications, casualties, and the video footage of each murder. That is, if the UN is going to give its stamp of approval to a new kind of war, but ask for a token of gratitude, that is what it should be. It might slow down the march of the drones, which is in fact being led by the United States and Israel. Israel developed drones in the 1970s. Medea Benjamin's book on drones begins with the story of how an Israeli engineer who had worked for an Israeli military contractor developed the prototype of the Predator drone in his garage in Southern California in the 1980s with funding from DARPA and the CIA. And the first thing he came up with was called the Albatross, which is not a bad name, really. Israel is the world's top exporter of drones, not the United States. Technion is a leading developer of drone technology, including drones that can fly 1,850 miles without refueling and carry 2 1,100-pound bombs, as well as miniature surveillance drones, bulldozers, and other weapons of fairly massive destruction used in illegally occupied lands, where Israel has used chemical and all other sorts of weapons while continuing to receive billions of dollars every year of what we in the US Orwellianly call military aid. So creating a drone island in the East River no doubt appeals to those in the Israeli government who spy on the US and those in the US who spy on Israel, but especially to those who want to legitimize and Americanize the US image of Israel's militarism, to make it as unquestionable in the US as US militarism sometimes is. The US media questions the cost of feeding the hungry, while treating militarism as a jobs program, even though programs to feed the hungry would more efficiently produce jobs. The federal government's $1 trillion a year for wars and war preparations doesn't count contributions from state and local governments and universities. The plans of Cornell and Technion to advance the technology of death on Roosevelt Island were apparently approved because of money involved. And in the process, a hospital will be destroyed. That is a typical trade-off. For a fraction of what we spend on weaponry, we could provide food, water, medicine to the world. Many, many more people are killed through what we do not do with our money than through what we do with it in wars. Of course, we could also choose to invest in education instead of in militarism. It is no coincidence that the nation that spends $1 trillion every year on militarism has $1 trillion in student debt. And no coincidence that universities corrupted by military contracts are holding forums promoting war in Syria. An early supporter of Technion who would be outraged by its current practices is a guy named Albert Einstein, who said, quote, "You cannot simultaneously prevent and prepare for war." And he was right. You have to choose one or the other. A lot of people right now are doing so. In September, the University of Edinburgh responded to student protests and withdrew its investment from Ultra Electronics, a company that produces the navigation controls for US killer drones. Here in New York, the Granny Peace Brigade and No Drones and the World Can't Wait and lots of other great groups have been pressuring the UN and the City Council and Congress and drone manufacturers and educating the public. The Center for Constitutional Rights is doing the legal work against drone murder, and it just may be that lawsuits turn out to be a major tool in stopping the drones. An organization I work for called Roots Action has set up a petition at banweaponizeddrones.org that right now has 99,000 signatures. I think we can bump it over 100,000 or maybe 200,000. So go to banweaponizeddrones.org. Where I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, we passed the first city resolution against drones, weaponized or surveillance, since when 3 more cities have passed them and 8 states. But the state laws have dealt only with surveillance, and they have not sought to limit the weaponization of domestic drones, including with non-lethal weaponry. Some of them have made exceptions to their surveillance restrictions for the U.S. military. 4 cities is not a lot, and I think one reason why is the complexities of the surveillance issue. I think cities would more readily pass resolutions committing not to use weaponized drones, and I would love to see New York City asked to do that. Even a failure on that question would wake a lot of people up to a new danger in the skies. Drone bases around the country are facing endless protests, as I'm sure Drone Island in the East River will if created. If New Yorkers can chase David Petraeus away, I am sure they can chase Technion away. Nowhere has seen more or better nonviolent resistance to drones than Hancock Air Base in upstate New York. But people have been risking and serving serious jail sentences to call attention and build resistance to these operations all over the country, including in Niagara Falls this past weekend, where activists are advancing a plan to turn the military airport into an array of solar panels that would power half of this state. This November, like this past April, will be a time of drone protests everywhere and of Code Pink's drone summit in Washington, D.C., which everyone should try to get to. Next Tuesday, Congressman Grayson will hear testimony from 2 kids injured in Pakistan by drones, although the State Department won't let their lawyer come. And yesterday, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch released reports on drones full of great information, but still maintaining that some drone murders are legal and some aren't. They and the UN Special Rapporteur will be at NYU Law School on Tuesday. And if you want to go to that, and you should, you have to RSVP at the Open Society Foundation's website. And on Wednesday, Brave New Films will release its film on drone killing. As we take on the drones, I think we should bear a few key points in mind. Foreign lives are not worth less than local ones. Killing with one kind of weapon is not worse than killing with some other kind of weapon. Killing is evil and illegal, whether or not you call it part of a war. The killing is multiplied many-fold by the spending of funds on it that could have been spent saving lives. A war is not a respectable activity marred by war crimes and atrocities. War is the crime. We shouldn't oppose waste at the Pentagon more fervently than we oppose efficiency at the Pentagon. If we can stop believing in just torture, or humane rape, or good slavery, we can stop believing in acceptable war. If the government of Israel makes war, we should employ every nonviolent tool to resist it, and the very same goes for the government of the United States of America.